TNTRadio.live. Today's News Talk Radio. TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're still in hour number one of this live broadcast. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Thank you for rejoining us. Big hello to everybody and a big thank you to everybody in the TNT chat community. You'll see that little red bubble in the lower right-hand part of your screen when you go to TNTRadio.live. That's our TNT chat community. Looks like it's filling up there. Appreciate all you guys, all the activity, the memes, the chatter, the opposition research. Loving that. Thank you for your contributions, everybody. That's where you want to hang out during the program. Now, before the break, we were talking about the historic moment which has just taken place this morning. South Africa tabled its opening arguments for the Genocide Convention at the International Courts of Justice in The Hague in the Netherlands. It was pretty stunning. It was 3 hours long. We've posted the full-length video of that from UN Web TV. That's up at 21stcenturywire.com, but you can watch that on YouTube and a number of platforms. It's freely available. I encourage everybody to watch it. There were presentations made by interventions by the South African delegation, also from Ireland as well, part of their legal team, and others. And the case is pretty comprehensive. We'll talk about what to expect tomorrow, but I want to welcome onto the stage political commentator Niko House. Hotspot Media is his organization. Follow him on X, Twitter, for the latest hot takes on a number of these top stories. Niko, welcome to TNT.
Hey, what's going on, Pat? Glad to be back.
No, it's great to have you, Niko, and I want to get your reaction firstly on what's happened. It's, what are your initial thoughts on this, just more broadly? How does this sit in the general political spectrum right now on the planet? Go ahead.
So one of the things that I think is very important to talk about, because I know a lot of people are going to be results focused, and they're going to want to know who's going to be punished and things of that nature. And of course, that's a very important aspect. But I want to kind of trail back a little bit and talk about the DNC fraud lawsuit, because I have the same sentiments about this as I did about that. This is important, not necessarily because of the conclusion that the courts come to, even though I'm pretty sure we all know what the conclusion will be. What's important is this conversation. The fact that these headlines are filled now with a list of every single crime that Israel has committed in Gaza. The fact that we're now having an open conversation, even though you and I have been talking about it on Twitter, you've had these people talking about it on TikTok, but now there is official documentation in a court of criminal law that mentions the fact that, no, this didn't start on October 7th, homie. Y'all can keep saying that, but that's not what happened. So to use that as an excuse for your genocide needs to be thrown out the window. That needs to be thrown out the window, because that's not what happened. It's showing the duplicity of the United States and how they don't actually care about not just the United States, but I would say basically all the NATO powers, how they don't actually care about human rights. And it also shows that the plight of the Palestinian people is no longer going under the radar. And that is what's important. When I mentioned the DNC fraud lawsuit, I said, yeah, the lawsuit, if we would have won it, it would have been great, but it wasn't to overturn the election. We already knew how that was going to go. What was important was the discovery. What was important was when Bruce Spiva sat there in front of a federal judge in the entire world and said the DNC can cheat and they feel like they have the right to, and that we can't do anything about it, which now let the world know exactly how to regard the Democratic Party as the corrupt organization pretending to be a political apparatus that they are. But it's basically, we're seeing the same thing happen with Israel play out. Now the world is seeing in real time, through breaking news, breaking headlines, these videos, these clips, these segments that have been posted, just how horrible Israel has treated Gaza. Because there are people who are paying attention now. They know how horrible the Palestinians are being treated, but they're only aware of how horrible they've been treated since October. There are now people finding out how horrible they've been treated for 60 years.
You make a good point there. I think you're, talking about, a lot of people are expecting results, expecting some like immediate results from this, a silver bullet, if you will, as if it's somehow going to change the tide of everything. But like the DNC fraud lawsuit that you're talking about, where the The Democratic Party rigged their primaries not once but twice. But that it's
three times.
Even though
they're on 3 times now.
3 times and counting. But the act is done. The deed's already been done. What's important is that's on the record. It's on some kind of an official record that people can point to in history and saying, look, this actually happened. Here's an acknowledgement of it. The discovery was there. The evidence was there. And I think that's what's happened with South Africa here. I mean, we can talk about the ins and outs of all the things that could happen, the sequence of events that could unfold to hold South Africa to account. To hold Israel to account, South Africa holding Israel to account, and the international community for genocide against the Palestinian people. So, but that's an important point. The other thing is on this, Niko, how significant is this to this scene, the image of this, to have a country like Israel in the dock, which is heavily favored by the Western powers, and if you look at who's supporting the South African case, there's nobody from Europe.
Ireland.
There's just Ireland, maybe Belgium, and there's
But
pretty
that's
much
significant
no
in
European.
of itself, right? The fact that it's Ireland. It's ironic, right? That would be almost tantamount to perhaps Puerto Rico defending its, calling out a genocide in this particular case with Israel, and knowing that the United States is looking there staring at them like this, because the UK knows that they were complicit in the genocide of Israel, but also in the genocide of Ireland, in the same way that the United States has actually committed a lot of human rights atrocities against Puerto Rico. It's like the same thing. Of course, Ireland would be on the side of South Africa. Obviously, South Africa would be on the side of the Palestinian people. Not only has Nelson Mandela obviously historically been on the side of Nelson Mandela as the first president, but it's also important to remember, and I love, because I know you saw that John Fetterman clip where he says, oh, I think that South Africa should sit this one out. No, actually they shouldn't, because I don't know if y'all have seen who's been talking. It's been the South Africans who have been part of the liberation of South Africa from apartheid. They know exactly what apartheid looks like. If there's anyone who should not be sitting this out, it is literally South Africa. They have taken the burden of their experiences and the responsibility that they have to make change, and they are literally using it to hold that apartheid state accountable. I don't know what else. Like, this is exactly what should be happening. It's what we expect to happen. So it's impressive to me that the two countries that actually understand what's happening, because they've actively suffered under 2 apartheid regimes to some degree. Hell, I would say that Ireland still has their own weird thing where some of them are kind of part of Ireland, but some of them are kind of not. It's a whole thing. But like, even still, those 2 countries who've had those experiences are actively speaking up, because they're like, yo, hey guys, I don't know if y'all know this, but we have some experience in this department. Maybe we can enlighten y'all on exactly how this is a genocide. And it speaks even more volumes how the United States, once again, the UK, the same countries that actually have been sending money to Ukraine, ironically enough, claiming that Russia's committing war crimes, that Russia's committing human rights atrocities. All of a sudden, they're like, hey, guys, we haven't seen anything. I haven't seen nothing. Look, Stevie Wonder. They're Stevie Wonder. They haven't seen anything, apparently. They can sing, right? They can tell a good story. They can put on the mask in front of the media and scream like they're the victims, scream like Israel's defending itself. But when it came to Russia, literally anything. If Putin woke up and accidentally stepped on an ant on the way to the bathroom, they were calling it a human rights atrocity and calling it a war crime. But all of a sudden, babies are being killed in the hospital 5 minutes after they were born. That's not a war crime.
Yeah, it's so over the top that it even just defies analysis, and I think that's actually one of the problems that the South Africans have, and anybody making this case is just there's so much. Nobody has seen anything like this much evidence assembled, plus the statements of intent, and traditionally that's the most difficult thing in a genocide case. Go ahead, Niko.
Yeah, no, 100%, Pat. That's the thing that kills me is like, hold on. I don't understand why we're debating whether this is a genocide. I'm pretty sure that there's like, they said it. They just did it. They didn't use the word genocide. They just said, hey, we're going to kill every Palestinian in Gaza until they decide to move to a different country and completely empty that area so that Israelis can live there instead. Guys, My name isn't Webster. I know a guy named Webster, and I watched the show Webster on it. My name isn't Webster. I understand that, but that is basically Webster's definition of genocide with more words attached to it. Literally, that's not hyperbole. People think that you have to kill everybody for it to be a genocide. That's a common misconception. No, that's not what genocide means. Genocide, because that's like saying, oh, the indigenous were not genocided by the colonial settlers here in the U.S. because there are still some indigenous people left, so it's okay. No, they still got genocided. That's what happened. That's what's happening right now. Milikowski, Bibi Milikowski. I just got to call him by his real name. I don't want him to keep getting away with the nonsense. That's his real name, guys. He's Polish and also from Philly somehow. But yeah, Milikowski has made it clear that their goal was to genocide people. There is a whole plan by the Israeli government that outlines a plan to pay off Egypt to take the Palestinians that are left and move them there into refugee camps. Literally a plan. And then there was a guy who got interviewed on Israeli television who was like, man, we're trying to pay people to take them. We want people to take them all. He literally said that. So, and then he's like, well, how are you going to put, the interviewer asked him, how are we going to put pressure on them? Well, we're doing it right now with the war. So you're killing people to get the rest of them to move so that you could take their land. Guys, what else do you need to hear? I'm glad that we're having this case. I'm glad that it's being discussed. But the fact that that this is even a debate, but that anyone believes is worthy of having. And the only reason that this should be a debate is because we're trying to determine just how severe the consequences should be for what they have done. That is the debate. It is not to figure out whether or not a genocide is actually being committed. You don't have to figure it out because they told you what the hell they wanted to do.
Let's go through the consequences of this. Where will this lead in terms of the process on this? So if there's a ruling on this, and very quickly for an emergency injunction, this is to halt genocidal activities by the state of Israel against the people of Gaza. A cease and desist letter would be then served. And then from there, if they comply or don't comply, this is eventually can go then to the UN Security Council, where there will be a vote. We know who will veto that, probably the United States. Then it can go directly. It doesn't die there in this case because it's the World Court. It goes to the UN General Assembly. And a simple majority vote on this and invoking the Uniting for Peace resolution. And then from there, we can have the UN could potentially suspend Israel as a UN member. Very, very big step. And even give Palestinian full membership, the Palestinian entity, state, or whatever, but will be recognized with higher status as Israel could be suspended. These are all possibilities. And from there, we could have an international tribunal, a la what was done with Yugoslavia in The Hague with Slobodan Milosevic, which I personally do not support the breakup of Yugoslavia. That's a separate debate. We can talk about that.
That was when the UN was weaponized. That wasn't that, yes. But that's what could happen, though. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, but these are the things could happen. Sanctions could be recommended on the back of this as well. So all of these things are possibilities going forward. And in addition to that, prosecutions could then be recommended, and that could be recommended to the ICC, which is the International Criminal Court that deals with individuals. The ICJ deals with countries. So all of these things are possible. This is early days. We could see some different things happening. This is going to be a long, drawn-out process, Niko,
Yeah.
but I want to talk about this, though, just from a geopolitical point of view. I was talking to my South African colleagues just after this. We had a Twitter space on this, and we heard from some South African. It was very emotional for South Africans to see their judicial heads, their heads of institutions, make this presentation to the World Court. This was a very emotional thing for them. And I think this is quite a powerful thing if you think about it, which is drawing a line between Africa and the Middle East in a way that hasn't been done before. But we're going to get Niko's reaction on this and more. Let's take a quick break with TNT, Today's News Talk. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. We'll be right back. Before the break, we were talking about getting some reactions from South Africa's case, which they have laid out their opening case for an emergency injunction against Israel for the crime of genocide. And so on the line right now with us in audio and visual is Niko House, Hotspot Media. He's joining us right now. Niko, thinking about this in context of a multipolar world that's emerging, this is really significant. We've got a direct, very powerful line that's now been connecting Africa to the Middle East. And South Africa has taken the initiative. They're leading this globally, and the world is behind them, except for North America and most of Europe and Australia. Pretty much people from every continent are backing the South African case. So I find this very interesting. And as you know, Africa is going through major transition right now, politically, economically, and finding its place in the geopolitical landscape. But your thoughts on the significance of this, more from a broader geopolitical perspective?
Muammar Gaddafi would be proud, right? Because we know he has been working with, or he was working with Arab leaders and Middle Eastern leaders and African leaders to unite the two continents before he was killed. And obviously a lot of people would argue, probably rightfully so, that was why he was killed. But this is why it's so important that it isn't put on the shoulders of one individual like Muammar Gaddafi or Bashar al-Assad in his case, and the list goes on. This is why it's important for there to be a unified level of accountability and responsibility in challenging the empire, obviously Israel being a key asset to the empire. You can't kill all the judges. You can't, everybody, you can't hit everybody with, but they gassed their own people. You can't hit all the judges with that. You can't hit every leader with that. Everybody who's going to testify, a lot of the United States for the first time, probably hearing their name today. And they're like, damn, we didn't know about him. We didn't know about her. We didn't know about it. Yeah, good. You know what that means? That means people have taken collective accountability and responsibility to ensure that stuff like this doesn't happen again in the future. And that they didn't pull up the ladder when they conquered their demons. South Africa specifically, Ireland as well. They didn't just pull up the ladder and say, we don't have to deal with this anymore. So, hey, we're good. They brought attention to Gaza and what's happening there. And they're bringing attention to Gaza and what's happening there and Palestine in general, because now a lot of people, because they've been, Israel's been pushing that Hamas narrative over and over and over again. But because of that, the videos have surfaced from the West Bank. And we all know there is no Gaza. There is no Hamas in the West Bank. And yet we're still finding out that Palestinians are being killed there. So we're at a point now. We're at a point now where people are being educated on things that they were never even aware was happening. And now the excuses are dying. And that's because one country from a continent that is evolving in every way, whether it be politically or economically, has continued a mission of Muammar Gaddafi and a lot of people who have wanted to see this unity because they wanted to challenge the Western Empire or the NATO powers that be. And it's a beautiful thing to see because we know where the resources are, right? The majority of the resources in the world that would help run the world are in Africa, obviously. A lot of them are in the Middle East. And then where they're not there, they're in places like Brazil, who also lies on the side of Gaza and the Palestinian people. They're in places like Bolivia. They're in places like Argentina, where there was leftists, but you see how hard they're working to get these right-wing people in because they see what's coming. They see all over the world. Their days are numbered, right? Their days are numbered, and this attempt at working together to bring accountability. Because of their experiences, and that's the important part. Because of their experiences, they know how important it is for people to pay attention and for you to use the power and microphone that you have to bring attention. Because of that, people are awake finally. They're awake, man. You remember how controversial it was back in the day, 2 years ago, Pat, to talk about this, to talk about what Israel was doing to Palestine. That was a controversial stance. And now look.
Yeah. And 2 months ago, it was controversial to call for a ceasefire. Just that was, borderline anti-Semitic, according to some people. We've come a long way, even in a couple of months. The world has come a long way on this issue, as well as what you're saying in the last few years. I was speaking to someone from Palestine, and they were practically in tears this morning, because for them to see people from South Africa, from Ireland, from other countries standing together, standing up for them, that meant a lot to them, to have the global audience. And by the way, UN Web TV, this is arguably one of the highest rated broadcasts they've ever done, and it looked like the stream was knocked out at a couple of occasions, because everybody from around the world was tuning in. Everybody wanted to watch this, and literally just opening arguments. But go ahead, Niko.
No, I was just saying, because I know it sounds silly, because there are still people dying. And my biggest gripe is that while this process is ongoing, there are going to be thousands of more people who are killed. That's my biggest problem with this entire situation. Not to mention this war that Netanyahu is trying to start with Lebanon, because his own people are even tired of the way that he's been handling the situation in Gaza. But on the flip side of that, it's one thing when your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, your aunts, your uncles, cousins are dying and the world is silent about it, right? That's totally, it's horrifying in and of itself for that to happen. But at least now, the pain and the plight that you're going through, the world is now aware of. And, regardless of what happens going forward, you now know you have allies out there. That in and of itself can give somebody the strength to go on the next day, right? That can give somebody the inspiration to continue to show what we've seen, these brave journalists who have been targeted by Israel, by the way. And I really hope that becomes a central part of the conversation during these hearings, because they clearly have been targeted, right? And maybe that inspires somebody else to step into that role, because we need it still. The conflict is still ongoing. But now they know if they step into that role, it won't just stop in Israel. It won't just stop in Palestine or at Al Jazeera in the Middle East. No, if they step into that role, the world's still paying attention, right? And that in and of itself is inspiring. And I understand why Palestinians across the world would be emotional finally seeing, and not just in one city, in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was accustomed to seeing pro-Palestine protests because of the Arab population there, right? This is happening in places like Minnesota. This is happening in places like Texas. This is happening in places all over the world who had never paid attention. And that's got to be inspiring, because maybe it won't be this generation. Maybe it'll be 2 generations from now. But at least we finally acknowledge the problem. We acknowledge the disease, so now we can finally create a solution to treat it.
And this doesn't this leave Washington and the Washington consensus in a really, really precarious spot here from a public relations point of view, from a political point of view, because they have 2 choices. They either could trash the UN, trash the international institutions, say that there's no merit. They already came out and said, I think John Kirby, White House spokesman, said there's no merit to this case, ridiculous.
Kirby and what's his name? Blinken, both of them said it recently. Mm-hmm.
Where are they going to go now, Niko? I mean, because it's a very credible individuals. They've lived apartheid. They've come through the other side. They're taking up this case on behalf of another weaker state that's being clearly bullied. There's going to have to be a split in Washington. People are going to have to break ranks, or are they going to all double down in unison? How's this going to play out, Niko?
No, they're going to break ranks. They're going. It's already. Because it's not just about Israel and Palestine. This is a very inconvenient issue for Washington D.C. right now. Pat Netanyahu, Milikowski. My apologies. Mm-hmm. He has put the world really in a very precarious predicament, because they're still dealing with the backlash from the Ukraine war, right? They're still dealing with that. They're still dealing with the backlash with the Democratic Party in particular. They're still dealing with the backlash of the fact that, y'all guy is not popular, and the elite Democrats want him out. But also, they have no idea who's going to fill the power vacuum. So everything in the Democratic Party right now is who's going to be the next guy up or the next woman up. They don't have that answer. So guess what? Everybody's going to start making business decisions about what they do and what they do not support. The Republican Party still has to deal with Trump and that whole situation. Do we get behind Trump and use this as an opportunity because we know the Democrats are a little bit fractured right now? Or do their egos get involved and they still have, still send people after Trump and still try to get behind the Democrats, which probably isn't a good idea because they're not really unified right now, are they? So this issue coming at the time that it's coming is very, very inconvenient because in both parties, they have, the party elites are Zionists for the most part, but some of the loudest voices are not. So that you have that issue. Some of the loudest activists are not. I know conservatives with millions of followers who had to be like, hold up, guys, whoa, this is where we part ways, right? We can look at what's happening with Candace Owens and Bishop Shapiro right now. What's with the world, the powers that be, like Netanyahu, especially what's crazy is knowing that this attack was going to happen, because we got to remember that he knew and he still allowed it to happen because of his political convenience for him, right? He put all of those politicians in a precarious predicament. And I personally believe he's aware of that. And that's part of the reason why this Epstein list dropped when it did. It was just a little bit of a reminder, like, hey guys, I know, God, I know. Look, my bad. Probably should have gave y'all some warning about this, but let's not forget my little flash drive that I got hanging in my drawer, in my sock drawer, right? That's what I think that was about. But there are a lot of politicians who are a little bit past the Epstein era. He ain't got nothing on them. And that's who probably is going to try to come and see and take power. So if you try to take power and you're pro genocide out in public, I don't think it's going to go well for you. Look at those polling numbers for Biden. I don't think it's going to go well for you if you do that. So now you're going to have people, even if it is for selfish reasons, challenging Israel and calling out that genocide, which in my opinion is just as important because liberals, you know them, they believe the gospel. So if so-and-so from such and such liberal democratic church says it, then they're going to believe it, right? That's why a lot of those accounts got banned the other day. That's a whole different conversation, but yeah, it's very important that even if it's for selfish reasons, all these people who are trying to gain power, you got to be on the side of Palestine because now the polling numbers have shown it, the social media numbers have shown it. Hell, Joy-Ann Reid is on the right side of history, guys. Joy-Ann Reid. Joy-Ann Reid. So like, yeah. Can you go ahead and just dunk the alley-oop, guys? That's all we're saying. Stam alley-oop for your career. Just get it right. That's all we're saying.
Any issue, Niko, that could somehow join AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene, MTG and AOC, any issue that brings those two together, you really have to raise your eyebrows and smell the coffee at that point, that you're actually looking at something that's seriously profound. Why? Because this basically exposes the two-party consensus, the two-party duopoly, the corruption of this uniparty. This issue has really exposed it. I know Ukraine did, and I know other issues have, but this is really on the foreign policy front.
Some were able to slide on Ukraine, though, right? Like Marjorie Taylor Greene was able to slide a little bit on Ukraine. There were some able to dodge that, right? RFK Jr., like him on the majority of issues, not on this. He's horrible on this shit. And he was able, I've always said that his weakness was foreign policy, and that was actually not even an insult at the time. I was just saying, like, this man's been fighting environmental cases for a majority of his career, fighting for medical freedom. That like you can only have so many wheelhouses, but you have to sacrifice some. Foreign policy was always going to be a weakness for him. But like he was able to slide on this until this came around, and now we're like, well, that's all, bro. You're going to have to deal with the consequences. All of them. Everybody who was able to slide on the Ukraine issue. But it also shows me, in my humble opinion, who did not actually understand the Ukraine issue, right? Were you just anti-Democrat and you realized the Democrats loved it and therefore you should have hated it? Was that what this was really about, right? Or did you actually understand it? You can't understand genuinely. I believe that you can't understand any imperialistic international struggle if you fail to understand Gaza, Palestine, and Israel. You can't. You can't understand the civil rights movement if you don't understand it. You can't understand the South African apartheid. You can't understand how Maduro has managed to stay in power for so long despite every single effort that the U.S. has made to oust him. Why? Because there is the unity of the African and the mestizo and the indigenous population against what they know will be an economic apartheid. They've already survived it. Cuba, why do you think they couldn't kill Fidel? How was Fidel even able to take over after they had so many attempts to take over? Because he said, hey, I can't promise you perfection, but I can promise you won't be segregated anymore and you'll have a fair shot. And that's all they needed. They said, you know what? Better than the last guy. At least I won't be a slave anymore. Like, you can't understand any of these international issues unless you understand Israel and Palestine. That is literally the caricature. That is the blueprint of the empire. We said this. We wrote this on a piece of paper. We don't know who gave us the authority to do this, but we wrote this on a piece of paper, and now it is what it is. Deal with it. And if you don't deal with it, there's two. You want to be called an anti-Semitic in that particular case. But if you don't deal with it, we'll just label you a war criminal, and we'll make sure that we deal with you, right? We're gonna take you out. We're gonna sanction your country. We're gonna call you anti-Semitic. We're gonna kill your careers. That is the blueprint of the empire. If you understand this conflict, you can use that as a trampoline to help you understand every other conflict in one form or another that involves the empire around the world.
I like to call it the Rorschach test of foreign policy, Israel-Palestine. And just on first glance, if you don't get it on first glance within 10 seconds, it's a real test to see where people are at on this, Niko. And but Americans tend to treat this like a buffet. They're like, well, yeah, I agree with you on Ukraine, but not Israel and not Venezuela. That's different. They're not looking at this holistically. That's the frustrating part. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, Niko, here. Yep. It's very frustrating. They're not looking at the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are total manipulation of economic systems, destroying economies, destroying countries in order to weaken them, in order to come in and buy them up at pennies on the dollar, and if they don't comply, strangle them until the regime dies. Like, that's the playbook.
And if anyone challenges them, they're a dictator.
Yeah, or a terrorist.
That's how it goes. Or a terrorist. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's how it goes. Like, I mean, people forget under Trump, this man tried to label the entire Iranian army as a terrorist organization. Like, that is a military, y'all. I don't know if y'all know, but it's actually one of the largest and most successful military operations in the world. But just because you don't like them and they're brown and they don't practice the same religion as you does not mean that they're a terrorist organization. That is absolutely ridiculous. But we've been conditioned to believe that that is the case. That is because they know that they have trained you to hear the word terrorist and assume that those people are evil animals who are not worthy of living. That way we can do whatever we want to them and the American people will not react. Bro, it is hard. Pat, it's hard for me to sleep at night. It's been for 6 or 7 years now, because I live in a country, well, not anymore, but I lived in the country and I live in a world where I know that there are people who are okay with the fact that Israel right now, for example, is probably preparing to drop a bomb on a little girl's home in Syria, and they don't give a fuck. Why? Well, she's in Syria. She's Arab. She's Muslim. That's why. If it was a little white girl in Nowheresville, Indiana, the world would be in a rage. She's like, oh God, how could that ever happen here? And God chose a country? But that's just what happens over there. That's just how those people are. No, that's not how those people are. That is actually prior to I would say the Balkanization, if you will, of the Middle East. Whereas the Ottoman Empire, they was running shit for a very, very long time. You think that they would be empire could last that long if it was totally and completely nuts and unstable within no, there was a reason why they were so successful, but there was also a reason why it was split in the way it was and why they've been purposely kept unstable since then. Because the world, kind of like with some of the countries you see the U.S. interfering with Africa and Central and South America, the world knows if they were allowed to unite, right, because a lot of the extremism, quote unquote, in the Middle East, that is American funded and American created. They didn't have terrorists before America literally created. They took a school and put it in Pakistan, and they trained terror. They trained people on how to be extremist terrorists. This is a fact, people. They knew that empire was was going to be a threat if they were allowed to maintain. And so they had to break it up like they did with Russia, right? That was what I hate to break some of my leftist hearts, but that was what the Bolshevik Revolution was actually about. It wasn't about the workers uniting. It was about Trotsky being a puppet and they're breaking up Russia and getting out the hands of the royal family, because it's a lot harder to challenge an empire that is unified. And if you have political transition and a little bit of political unrest, then it's a lot easier to take him over. And that's what Trotsky's role was, but Stalin kind of came out of nowhere and messed that whole thing up. But that was what that was always about. You want to know how you know? Because they did it. They did World War II and they were like, hey, man, we're going to try this shit one more time. And that's what happened. They balkanized Russia effectively. And so don't tell me that these people are inherently animalistic, that because, oh man, look, they got little pedophiles over there. Bro, first of all, I know y'all Catholic church motherfuckers. I know that y'all ain't talking about pedophilia. Y'all got the whole goddamn world, all world governments protecting the pedophiles you going and bowing in front of and asking forgiveness from and confessing to every Sunday. For real? Y'all want to talk about pedophiles? Y'all want to talk about crimes against humanity? You want to talk about a way of life that would probably be looked at as weird? I'm sure you take somebody from a religious family and a conservative family from the Middle East. Go, just drop them in Hollywood. Just drop them in a random Hollywood party for 30 minutes and see if they don't throw up. Talking about weird. We're the weird ones. Americans are weird. It isn't them. They have their ways, and I'm not a fan of organized religion, but I am a fan of culture and appreciating cultures, and I also understand how sometimes some things they do could look a little bit different in mine. Oh, that's weird for me, but that doesn't make him less human. And that is what breaks my heart, is that we have so many people, man, even in the field that we're in, that just speak so flippantly. Like when I'm like, hey, man, like there are people dying right now. Like, you don't care? Oh no, I do care, man. But that's just how it is over there. No, it is how it is over there because of us. And South Africa doesn't want to be that. They don't want to be the reason that atrocities are allowed to persist because they either contributed to it or said nothing about it.
Yes, Niko, but what about our democratic values? What about our Judeo-Christian values in the West? You're really just writing and dismissing all of this out of hand. I mean, what about the
anti-Semitic
rules-based international order? Where would we be without the West? Just kind of managing this all, keeping everybody kind of organized and in line, and know their place in the global pecking order, and all this is Nikki Haley. Speaking of Trotskyites, I'll throw this last one to you. Nikki Haley, the neocons being the new Trotskyites, I guess, of the era. Nikki Haley said that there would be no Hamas, there would be no Hezbollah, if not for, I was thinking Israel, but she said Iran. She said Iran.
Yeah.
They're both resistance movements that wouldn't exist without Israeli occupation in Lebanon and Palestine. But that's just so typical. Nikki Haley is like the new sort of shrill sounding board for all of this stuff. But your final thoughts before we break.
But she did say, Pat, Hillary Clinton was her inspiration to get into politics. So I think that speaks for itself. But it's just it's like weird listening to her talk, because she's like, none of this would happen without Iran. I'm like, whoa, what? And I'm always confused as to how she gets to that point. I'm always genuinely confused. I'm like, hold on, did she say that Hamas? Well, hold on. Hamas wasn't around until Israel funded them. And then, like, how? I'm confused. Where is she getting this from? Because sometimes when people say something like maybe there's like a loose connection, and I'm not saying that maybe Iran has supported them in some way, form, or fashion, but the existence of Hamas and Hezbollah is because of Israel. And that needs to be made clear. If there was no Israeli apartheid, in both of those cases, especially in Gaza, there would be no Hezbollah or Hamas. But more importantly, if they weren't, in Hamas's case, if they weren't trying to fund an opposition that basically turned their back on Israel, they're like, yeah, screw you guys, we just wanted the money. And now you're dealing with them, there would be no Hamas. They're the ones who got rid of the PLO. They're the ones who got rid of the oppositions, the peaceful opposition parties in leadership in Palestine to put Hamas in power. And now they're paying the consequences for it, just like the U.S. did whenever we created Al-Qaeda. And then they're like, yeah, I think we don't want to listen to y'all anymore, and did what the hell they wanted to do. That's what happens.
Yeah, Hamas got a little bit too uppity for Tel Aviv, apparently, and now they're regretting it. But all in all seriousness, your point's very well taken, Niko, and absolutely spot on. Really, if you want to put this all into its proper geopolitical and historical perspective, Niko House, Hotspot Media. Niko, give your platforms, your channels a big shout out before we break. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can find me on Hotspot Media on Twitter at Hotspot. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Real Niko House. I'm also on YouTube. Just look up Niko House. My name should pop up. Niko, not Nico for all you people out there. House. I'm also on TikTok and I'm on Instagram as well at Real Niko House.
Yeah. And as the 2024 election gets underway, you want to be following Niko and his reactions, his takes on what's happening in U.S. politics. He'll be very much on point. Thank you, Niko, for joining us at TNT this week.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate you having me back on.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Niko House, top of the hour news headlines coming up. We'll be back with a whole lot more on the other side. Basil Valentine, Christian James. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a few.